Welcome to this program. Resuming our Monday program, the study of progressive stages of meditation on emptiness. So, even though we are in the middle of January, I'd like to wish you all a very happy New Year. And I'm very happy that you've all decided to attend this class here. This is something that you'll find very helpful in terms of your path, in terms of understanding and in terms of practice. It's beginning to, you could say, work at, dismantle, take apart the causes of suffering. And the causes of suffering is this reality that we attribute to reality, and reality doesn't have the nature that we think it is. We're misunderstanding reality, and that's what the Buddha awoke to, and that's the message of the Buddha. We need to align ourselves with reality, and that is what in the Buddha's enlightenment consisted of. The wonderful thing about the Buddha's enlightenment was that he discovered our conditions, actually, despite the trouble that we get ourselves into, the actual nature of reality is good. The actual nature of reality is not imbued with all the suffering that we unnecessarily call upon ourselves in our deluded, confused condition. So the motivation that we bring to this practice is very much a wish to get to the bottom of what drives suffering universally, and we do so with others in mind. We are aware of the larger community that we are part of, all sentient beings, no less. So these are included within our aspirations when we engage in this this path, this particular practice we're doing right now in terms of studying, and also when we meditate. So this is, as always, what we proceed anything that we do, and particularly within the context of Dharma, with the checking of our motivation and the generating this thought that we're doing this for others, we're doing this for all sentient beings, and an entire path is based on that. This is what our attitude is imbued with, and also, as we will see, this is actually also coming closer to reality. This is us yanking us out of our self-centering and a rather small agenda about just me, and freeing ourselves from that. Part of that is actually just that we begin to think larger, thinking out of the box for sure, but also just thinking in a very sort of domestic, pedestrian way of the others. We wish others well. Anyway, that's the motivation that we bring to this. And I should also say, I apologize. You'd think by now I would have gotten it down, but still there still seems to be sort of little confusions that creep up in terms of just the technicalities. So I apologize with regards to the registration. Again, there was some strange link. Some of you would have clicked on it, and it took us, basically the registration link would take you back to a recording of a previous session. I think the last one we had in December, in fact, but I have no idea how that could happen, Anyway, I'm glad you're here, so welcome to, and this, as you know, this is then entirely online. I'm actually sitting in the temple here at Five Peaks and sort of just presiding here in splendid solitude. Anyway, so I'm gathering the sound and everything is okay. Otherwise, you would have notified me. So I'm just going to launch into the text. So the progressive stages, they essentially consist of what we normally call the tenets. Normally we talk about the 4 tenets, particularly from the Mahayana point of view. And these are the the philosophies that increasingly are on to understanding the central message of Buddhism, which is the absence of the solidity that we attribute to reality. So you could say a large part of what we're doing in the Buddhist teaching, in addition to calming our mind and becoming a nicer person, it's also becoming wiser. It's beginning to be more insightful with regards to the nature of reality. But there's some pretty radical perspectives that apply here. And it is the perspective that, like I started off saying, reality isn't the way we think it is. And that's where we are gradually dismantling the assumptions about this notion of self, the notion of the phenomenal world. And this we're taking apart, and we do this gradually in the path, really. The views that we've covered, what is generally known as the Shravaka perspective, covers the Vibhashika and Suchantika perspective, is very much an insight into egolessness, but still with the assumption that there is some quality of consciousness that exists as an absolute, and similarly also with the phenomenal world, where it's very similar to the old belief in atoms. You know, that we used to believe that the sort of the building blocks of phenomena were these particles. This, of course, nowadays we realize it's not that simple. But anyway, the views that we have covered so far really operate with that. Now we're going into the Mahayana, and that's where there's a much greater courage, a much greater vision, much more radical, really, in its analysis of phenomena, and seeing that even when we dismantle our normal assumptions around the self, when we dismantle the idea of a self as being unitary, permanent, unconditional, if we keep going, then actually we will see that even what we attribute solidity or reality to in terms of consciousness is equally that way. That mind itself has no reality, and that for the Mahayana is not really a problem. It's because there's still there's still a cognitive obscuration taking place when we are holding on to some reference. And until we let go entirely of this addiction to reference, which is really just a way that we reassure, you could say our confusion reasserts itself. It's a bit like we could say ego would like to reassert itself by having something it can bounce off, something it can relate to. And that also goes for the phenomenal world, which also in the Mahayana we say, well, things appear, but there's no reality in these phenomena whatsoever, no more than a dream. And so that's where presently we are looking at the Chittamatrin perspective, which is saying exactly that phenomena, as we perceive them, are essentially just created by our mind. There's some perspectives that apply with the Mahayana in terms of the two main lineages in the Mahayana, which are the Madhyamika and the Yogacarya. And we could say the Madhyamika really has the ontological perspective, and the Yogacarya, they're more about phenomenology. Madhyamika is seeing, how is reality? Well, it's empty. Well, that's enough. Whereas the Yogacarya, they deal more with our experience. And the phenomena might be empty, but we're still stuck with some degree of experience. And the Yogacarya, they do quite a bit of explaining about how the confused condition exists, how the non-confused condition exists, the qualities of it in terms of experience, and also the nature of the path. So that's where in the Yogacarya, there's a lot of, you could say, explanation about the functioning of the mind and so forth. But what we very often have is the idea that the Yogacarya is some sort of inferior view that holds on to some solid idea of mind, and that's not necessarily the case. Of course, we need to, in dealing with this understanding of how we experience things, ultimately arrive at the emptiness of our experience. But for the time being, it's quite helpful to have this way in which we understand how phenomena works. It really is part of the way that we can develop a theory of our knowledge, epistemology. And so that's where the Yogacaryans, they're quite helpful in terms of understanding our experience. Of course, also the previous tenets that we've looked at, they also do that, and in many ways very similarly, but they operate still with some idea that there is some solid world out there. The Yogacaryans say, no, not quite. It's very much the mind. Anyway, enough of what I have to sort of say in terms of generally introducing the material, and let's look at where we got to in the text. So essentially the point really is that without falling into this thing we call solipsism, which is when we say everything is my mind, then we might think, oh, there's nothing in this world except me, and everybody else is just a figment of my imagination. That's not what the Yogacaryans are saying when they say everything is mind, but they're just saying that the way that we perceive things is filtered through the mind. And so the creation that we experience, it is the way that we see things is very much our mind. And we have this classical example where we would say, you take a glass of water and the 6 realms, the beings of the 6 realms will all see it in different ways. And we only have to play some music for a friend to see how we see things differently. The object is perceived very differently on the basis of our particular habitual patterns, our particular, you could say, disposition. So this we've looked at, and we're today going to be looking a lot at really the nature of where all our experience actually abides in terms of how we experience the present reality, and also where all the what we refer to as karma or vasanas, the habitual patterns in karma, how they actually abide. So I think we've touched on that, but we're going to be looking a bit at, you could say, 3 aspects, which are actually 2 sets of 3 aspects. Don't mind, okay? But one is the ground consciousness, and then what we call the defiled consciousness, and then the actual consciousnesses that we ordinarily think about in terms of our perceptions, you know, what we see, hear, touch, taste, etc., and also our thinking. So there's 3 aspects of our consciousness: the ground, the thing that goes me, ego, and then the conscious experiences. But we'll look at this in more detail. So I'm having some message here that the sound is breaking up. I'm afraid I can't do much about it. If it's from my side, it could be from your side, by the way. But if it's from my side, I think it's just, yeah, you know, that's how it is with the internet, isn't it? Yeah. All good in Bris Vegas. Well, that's good. All right. Sound is good. Okay. Sound is fine. Thank you. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, you know, it is a rather fickle phenomenon, isn't it? This internet. So we're just going to have to live with that. There's a call of distress going out from Maxville. No more toilet paper left. So think kindly of, have compassion for your friends in Maxville. They're missing some essential ingredients. So they might have good sound, but no toilet paper. Okay, so the Chitta-Martan system. So this is where the Khenpo then says, according to the Chitta-Martan system, the mind that realizes that there are no separate perceiver and perceived. Let's just get rid of this. Okay, what we generally think about in terms of subject and object, right? There's something that we perceive. You're seeing your computer, hearing this, and so forth. That's the object, and there's also someone perceiving it. But you know what? This is very much, this is interesting, isn't it? Where do you find the dividing line? Now you think there's something out there and there's something perceived, but it's actually a one-shot experience. So this is where we generally, I mean, of course, we do operate with that, and we're very dependent on that. You know, where is my tea, for example? You know, where is my tea? Oh, well. Ah, okay. So I'm very dependent on the object, but then again, the perception as such, in terms of just our experience, this division of subject and object is very much accentuated on the basis of our kleshas. My incredible attachment to my tea turns this into a very solid object, and it solidifies my sense of this hungering me. And so the way that we relate to the object in terms of our kleshas, in terms of our afflicted mind, that deepens this duality. And we can see the moment that we sort of go, oh yeah, tea is there, it's nice, you know, no tea, that's also okay. There's an ease that takes place and there's an openness that takes place with regards to our reality. And that is very much what signifies the sage. The sage is not so stuck on this, you could say, it's not so dependent on the object. Still some way to go. Anyway, we are here talking about the potential the mind has for freeing itself. So we are presently talking about the mind that realizes this non-duality. Excuse me. Good thing I'm alone here. The mind that realizes that there are no separate perceiver and perceived entities in a moment of consciousness is the self-aware, self-illuminating aspect of each moment of consciousness. When this arises, there is no longer an appearance of such separate entities, and so the base consciousness, alaya vijnana, which we will be looking at, is said to be purified. See, the problem with our samsaric condition is that we fail to recognize the original ground, which is open and free from any reference, such as subject and object. And the sage, through the practice of the path and analyzing the object, seeing there's nothing actually there, analyzing the subject, seeing that there's nothing there, there's a lessening of these fixation. And the mind naturally, you could say, finds its original purity, its original sanity. It's just like when we are less hysterical, then we're more sane. Our hysteria generally consists of us being overly concerned with some object out there and experiencing a subjective pain in regard to the object. And that we can sort of whip up to various degrees, and we can also come down. And the thing is, when we come down and calm down, there's much more unease and a sanity that actually is in tune with our reality. So it's not that mystical, really, but our original ground is misunderstood, and that's then where it becomes this, you could say, this vast space of unconsciousness, which is the alaya vijnana. And so it's on the basis of the mind that realizes non-duality that we purify this alaya vijnana. So mind at all times has this quality of being cognitive. We know something's hearing, something's seeing, etc. And so there is continually a quality of simply knowing, but that knowing is not just a blind knowing, but it actually has this illuminating quality of the perceptions. You can hear, you can see, there's color. You can think of things in terms of color. So there is the quality of the mind that has the capacity to illuminate. And so in this way, our mind continually is with us. But in the case of an ordinary sentient being, then this consciousness, this, you could say, self-aware, is turned into actually a lack of awareness. And it's then within that, then the self, the ego, plays out. Now, Khenpo continues, at this point, at the point of realization, only the self-illuminating, self-aware aspect of consciousness arises as a pure stream of radiant, clear moments of consciousness. And that's where the sage then has the experience of clarity. There's the condition of non-confusion. Now, the Chittamatrans were great meditators, and their ideas arose from their experience through meditation. That's why we sometimes refer to them as it says here actually, Khenpo said, this is why they are often called yogacharyans. So those who hold to the way of yoga. And yoga is aligning, meaning aligning ourselves with reality. And see, that's where they take some flack. They're sometimes known as Chittamatrans, right? Or they are known as Chittamatrans, mind only. They're also, in terms of yogacharyas, they're aligning themselves, and it gives the idea that they're aligning themselves with something. Well, there is, but that something can very well be realization. So it's not necessarily that they're as what we call substantialist, as they sometimes are made out to be. But yes, they do use the language of that there is a mind and we're working with the mind. Khenpo says, it may be that their meditation experience was as profound as in the Shentong Yogacharya Madhyamika. We'll be looking at that, stage 5, progressive stages. And that is essentially where it's the realization of emptiness through Madhyamika that nevertheless abides by this quality of luminosity. And that's where we would say the mind is intrinsically luminous. And so that's where the Shentongs, they would say, well, everything else is an illusion, but luminosity is not an illusion. And that's why they're refers to as Shentong, which means those who say everything else is empty, intrinsic emptiness, everything else is empty, but Buddha nature or the luminous quality of the mind, that's not empty, that's for real. You can't blame them having that view. We'll come back to it, it's subtle. But anyway, it essentially refers to those that meditate on this condition of non-confusion. They're undiluted. So it could very well be that yogacharyans have that. And in fact, we also have many great yogacharya siddhas. I can't remember exactly. We should also understand that such siddhas, of course, also, it's not as if they didn't realize Madhyamika, but we do have some that officially great Mahasiddhas who are seen as enlightened holders of both the Mahamudra and other lineages. They were officially classified as yogacharyans. So again, we're not we don't see the yogacharyans as being that inferior, but nevertheless, for the sake of the discussion, they are sort of classified at the beginning of the Mahayana. So that's a Yogacharya Madhyamaka. But when, and this is coming back to the Yogacharyans, but when they came to explain their system, it was easily faulted as incoherent. And that's where we have some Yogacharyans, like someone called Dhammapala, who would say that the nature of the mind, yeah, well, that's it's real. Mind is real. Shentongpas, they avoid this fault of the Chittamatran system, and we'll see that because they are essentially Madhyamikas. Yeah. Now, the Chittamatrans teach that there is an alaya vijnana, which is the stream of consciousness that gives rise to all 6 kinds of consciousness and their objects: form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. Alaya vijnana is the ground consciousness that we, for example, experience when we are sleeping and we're dreaming. We have all these perceptions and we perceive that we are hearing things, seeing things, tasting, and so forth. So that's the basis really for all appearances. So the alaya vijnana, then the Khenpo says, means the basis of all. And it is called that because all that manifests does so on the basis of this stream of consciousness. Both the perceived and the perceiving aspect of each of the six consciousnesses are none other in substance than the alaya vijnana. So essentially what we're saying is everything that we as sentient beings that go through all that we're going through, waking state, sleeping state, all what we accumulate in terms of karma, all we experience in terms of the realms of samsara, all of that is in fact just the playing out of the alaya vijnana. So all these manifestations then, they are like waves on an ocean. They are never other than the ocean, though they manifest differently. So everything is just like waves of this ground condition of confusion that is the alaya vijnana. And it's that when we're free of that, then that same vast space of non-confusion is freed, no longer veiled. And we were talking about this yesterday, actually, in Treasury of Precious Qualities, how we would see the difference between the alaya vijnana and the dharmakaya is really just like the difference between the space in the daytime and the space when it's obscured at night. So the ground of space is intrinsically pure, but temporarily for every sentient being, it's obscured. And so not seeing their true nature, sentient beings wandering in samsara. And that's why they're stuck in this condition of the alaya vijnana. Okay, the alaya vijnana, the Khenpo says, is what accounts for the continuity of consciousness through life, death, and rebirth, deep sleep, dreaming, and the meditative absorption of a yogin. So this is obviously meditative absorption without the vipassana that sees emptiness. The alaya vijnana is called the eighth consciousness. Okay? So we have what we call the six consciousnesses. We looked at this before in the Abhidharma, the five senses, right? And then we have thought. Yeah? These are what we call the six consciousnesses. Yeah? Then we have one more we're going to look at now. That's the defiled one, number 7. That's the toxic ego consciousness. And then the eighth consciousness that we've just described, which is the ground. Now, the Khenpo says, one may wonder whether every being has his or her own alaya vijnana, or whether there is only one. In the relative truth, each individual has his or her own stream of alaya vijnana, and their own actions ripen to them. In the absolute truth, there is only mind, and it is empty of any separate perceivers and perceived objects. And that's where, as long as we have this obscured condition, there's a sense of me, my karma, my experience, and so on. This ignorance is very much, you could say, held up within this condition of subject, object, and the constructions that go with that. So that's the obscured state. When there's the freedom from that, there's no longer that sort of retreating into this duality. And so the mind is no longer held by that. That's why there's no longer any duality that takes place. And that absence of duality, then the Yogacaryans here are said to the Yogacaryans are said to hold that that mind is real. Now, the seventh consciousness, okay, this is where yesterday in Jigme Lingpa's text, he refers to this as the great demon. That is the great ignorance that is not just, you could say, innocently ignorant, but the one that goes, me, I'm so important. Trungpa Rinpoche, he compares this to if you have a vast expanse, which is just this big open space, and in there's this little grain of sand that says, here, me, I'm special. So that's where this failure to really relax into the openness that is not separate, this occurs. And that, you could say, drama, the little drama being, that comes into place. That is the seventh consciousness. Khenpo says the seventh consciousness is called the klesha mind, nyönyi in Tibetan, afflicted mind, or the the defiled mind. It is a mind consciousness, the sixth type of consciousness. So it belongs within the condition of mind, but it has a particular toxic quality. It is the ignorant moment of consciousness that instantaneously follows the sense consciousness, causing the outer perceived and inner perceiving aspect to appear as separate entities. So there we are, we're basically seeing and perceiving, living, if you like, and then all of a sudden there's somebody who wants to sort of, how do you say, take ownership of it. You know, there's a vast open meadow and somebody has to say, you know, this is Mount so-and-so, or this is mine, this is my property. And every perception that we have, we would say that this is also we saw in the Abhidharma. We have this also very much in the epistemology of the Sutrantikas, which is the perception takes place, but then there's immediately perception takes place. There's this ownership, sort of like, do I like this? Do I not like that? And so initially there's a moment. There's sort of, you could say, this first thought, best thought. There's sort of a virginal moment of perception. And then comes the overlay of I like, I don't like, and so on. So that's where this klesha mind, it comes in and it interprets what's being perceived. And this is something we also have in Western epistemology. I referred to it a few times now, which is this problem that we're actually not seeing the object, we're seeing our version of the object. So here in the Buddhist context, we are identifying this as the klesha mind that essentially interprets what we're perceiving. So the Khenpo says the first moment of sense consciousness is free from this ignorance, but it is so swift one is not aware of it, and all one's conceptual notions follow on the basis of the following moment, the klesha mind. By meditating on the emptiness of a difference in substance between the inner perceiving and outer perceived aspects of consciousness, the klesha mind is removed, and the self and sense consciousness are purified. So that's already what we're doing the moment that we're meditating. This, what is it? I think Trilinobu Rinpoche would refer to this rat mind. This sort of mind that sort of wants to sort of just dig into and possess and so forth. Not very politically correct sort of, you could say, labeling of the rat. But then again, you know, the way that we popularly perceive it and so forth, it is this quality that again fails to really relax into to experience. And when we're meditating, we're beginning to let go of that. So the moment that we analyze phenomena and we begin to see the complexity, a bit like when we talked about the firebrand, right? We see something as a continual solid ring, but then we actually look and we can see, it's just somebody who's twirling a torch or a stick of incense very quickly. There is actually not the solid ring that we think there is, and that's the way that we ordinarily solidify phenomena. And this is done where we then, on the basis of that ignorance, we then have this like, dislike, and so on. In the practice of analysis, we begin to see through this. And in the practice of meditation, we train in letting go of the mind that fixates on these perceptions. So that's where the way that we're doing this is actually through letting go of these moments of subject and object. Then Khenpo says the alaya vijnana, at that point, when we meditate on the emptiness of this duality, then he says the alaya vijnana no longer produces the illusory dualistic appearances of separate perceiving and perceived entities. And so the self-aware, self-illuminating aspect of each moment shines forth, unobscured. So this is what's happening This is what happens. You don't have to think, oh, is there a specific meditation technique now that I have to apply? No, this is the usual meditation that you will be doing on the basis of your teacher's instructions or on the basis of the meditation that we do here and so forth, allowing the mind to settle without perpetuating its ordinary confusion, with a degree of insight into the emptiness of phenomena. Then that is really where we are essentially applying what we're talking about here. So we needn't think, should I be doing something different? We just do what we do normally, you know, just do practice nindra, do prostrations, take refuge, develop bodhicitta. It's all in here. But it is what you could say, it's the acid that dissolves this delusion of subject-object. The moments of consciousness, including both the perceiving and perceived aspect, are called the dependent nature because they arise in dependence on they arise in dependence on causes and conditions, like reflections that appear in a mirror that only arise in dependence on the objects they reflect. They are conditioned by the past actions of the person whose stream they constitute. So of course, when we perceive something, then we have a particular way of, you know, we hear a piece of music, we see something, an object, and so on. We have particular ways that we perceive and solidify and label this phenomenon. That's different depending on whether we're a mouse or a giraffe or a human. So we have these ways that we experience our reality, and this is what the Yogacarans, they refer to as the labeling ignorance, and that takes place on this mind. The mind, you could say, can go either way. That's why I would say it's dependent. This mind that we're talking about all along, we can refer to as the dependent nature because it depends on the causes and conditions that construct its particular experience. You know, we're very, you could say, flexible, we're very malleable, and we're very conditioned. And that's how our mind exists. So this understanding of the mind as it exists in terms of being a confused mind is really on the basis of this dependent nature being, you could say, informed by confusion. As in the Shravaka system, the Khenpo says, the person is relative truth. The absolute truth is the emptiness of those consciousnesses of separate, independent entities of perceiver and perceived. So in the Shravaka general system, you could say the Hinayanist or Shravaka, then there's this notion of the person. And the person then experiences solid moments of consciousness, that is the perceiver, and also solid moments of consciousness that is perceived. And that's relative truth. But the things themselves, they're empty of the solidity that's attributed to them, you know? So that's the emptiness of perceiver and perceived. That's absolute truth. The separate entities, which we call mind and matter, are simply inventions. In other words, they are the imaginary nature. So here, talking about from the Yogacarya perspective, these things then that we experience, mind and matter, they're in fact just inventions. They are they're imaginations. So what we have is that we have this mind that is wide open, you can say, but then we infuse it with our delusion, and that's our imaginary nature, and that's the relative truth, if you like, according to the Yogacarya. That's the deluded way that our mind ends up. You could say there's the mind, and it can be either deluded or not deluded. So that delusion that the mind is subject to is called the imaginary nature. I'm just going to give you a short. Let me just hold on. Go a little further. We're essentially going to talk about this nature of mind, which we call the dependent nature, and it has two aspects: confused, not confused. So when it's confused, we call it the imaginary nature. When it's not confused, we call it the fully, or the perfected nature. Translators translate the word Yongdrup in Tibetan in all sorts of ways, but usually the perfected nature, the fully perfected nature, and so on. So the Khenpo says a very important element in Chittamatra doctrine is the way it subtly divides experience into these three natures. One, the imaginary nature, the dependent nature, and the truly existent nature. So the one in the middle here, that's, you could say, the mind, that the Yogacarans say, well, that's what we got, right? Now, they would say when it's diluted, it's stuck in the imaginary nature. When it's not diluted, that's the truly existent nature, the real nature. Yeah. I'll just show you. I made once. I ran this by Tongsa Khinchen once. I was trying to get my head around this, and I ran this by Tongsa Khinchen. He gave it the thumbs up, but I haven't seen others actually identify it like that. But I think this is valid. So we could say, here's the mind. This long box here. Let's just call this the mind, right? That's where we are. Now, when this white part here is dominant, then we have the imaginary nature. Now here I'm talking about the path. So what happens is along the path is that we have less and less imaginary nature. And you could say the perfectly existent nature, and what we also sometimes call the pure dependent nature, begins to become more and more manifest. And that's where there's some color that then arises. We already have Buddha nature here, but it becomes more and more and more developed as we progress along the path. And so here on this side, we have enlightenment. Here we have the condition of samsara over here. So as we diminish our confusion, then the qualities of you could say mind's pure nature become more and more manifest. So in fact, we have these three natures then described here in terms of the practice of the path. Now they can be described in various ways, but here it's just in terms of what are we doing. It's quite straightforward. We're eliminating, and this is how we always describe the path, really. We're eliminating what veils our Buddha nature, and we're gradually realizing Buddha nature. So we talk about the path in terms of these two qualities, elimination and realization. Okay, some questions here. By the way, isn't this beautiful? This is Borobudur. I've never been there, but gosh, so beautiful, huh? Amazing, amazing the love and the vision and the sort of the celebration of enlightenment that's essentially reflected in a culture that undertakes something like this. You know, the inspiration, the force of wisdom that really prompts this kind of artistic expression. So beautiful. Okay. So, is karma imaginary nature? Yeah, it is. So you could say karma is really the way that the imaginary nature perpetuates itself. Yeah, upholds itself. I saw some books saying if one only meditate on shamatha, then this person might generate some superpower. Yeah, that's for sure. Like reading others' mind, walk through the wall, but only when people meditate on vipassana, one can see emptiness. May I ask why people can have superpower by reaching the stage of the stage that alaya vijnana stop causing illusion? Well, look, this is normal. You have people. Look, Uri Geller. You know, has anybody ever heard of Uri Geller? You know, there's lots of people who have incredible powers. They don't have enlightenment, but they have all sorts of power on the basis of their mind. So you have all sorts of, you know, amazing feats. Read Paul Brunton's Behind the Closed Door of India. There's so many accounts of people who have, just on the basis of having strong concentration, shamatha essentially, they have all sorts of powers. But it doesn't set them free from the fundamental illusion. Yeah. Enlightenment is vivid, yes, that's the thing. You could say samsara is a bit of a half-life, a bit of a sort of gray zone. There's not so much color. Enlightenment is where we take off the sort of the dulling optics of duality. We see things more technicolor. Is the chart you presented for the causal path? Well, it actually reflects equally yeah, of course, definitely. But you know, the thing about the resultant path is that, see, behind this veil, right, the white section here, behind that, the color is already there. It's just it becomes, as we thin it out, it becomes more and more manifest, but it's always there. Similarly, Buddha nature is always there, even though it's veiled. So you can say the resultant vehicle is simply just the yoga of invoking the already spontaneously present qualities of the enlightened nature. This is the view, the view and practice of the resultant vehicle. The gradual vehicle, that is where we are continually working with thinning out that. But that said, of course, when we are in the resultant vehicle, when we're meditating on the color here behind, right, as we do when we practice sadhana, deity, pure perception, right, we are implicitly also gradually eliminating that. So the Vajrayana is also a gradual path as such, but it is one that takes the result, that which is, you know, the color here behind, it takes that as the view, you could say the ontological reality, the actual reality. It takes that as its starting point. I heard the seventh consciousness sometimes referred to as manas. Do you know this? Yeah, this categorical origin. Yeah, well, yes. And so, so this is the yi or nyeni. Yeah, that's right. I think it is actually referred to in Sanskrit as manas. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Okay, maybe make imaginary life gray on the chart. Yeah, it's too nice and white, right? Yeah. Just make it a little bit sort of unappealing and gray, I guess. Is the dependent nature of the nature of emptiness and the perfectly existent nature, the uncompounded? Yeah, it is by nature emptiness, that's true, but it's obscured by the imaginary nature. And so we are actually not seeing the proper, that's the thing, we're not seeing the proper, the proper dependent nature actually is pure. There is what we call the pure dependent nature. The nature of this dependent nature, nature is emptiness, but when it's obscured by the imaginary nature, then we're not seeing it for what it is. Yeah. Okay, shall we continue with the text? So beautiful, huh? Borobudur. Okay, so we're becoming a little bit familiar with this. The imaginary nature that obscures the dependent nature, that's mind, and then you say it's lying there open. And unfortunately, it gets obscured, it gets hijacked by confusion. Then when we peel back confusion, the dependent nature is seen for what it is, and that we call the truly existent nature. So Khenpo says, the Shravakas had only distinguished two kinds of reality, the relative reality of the world as we know it, and the absolute reality of the skandhas not being self. The relative reality is like the dream experience, and the absolute reality is that the person suffering in the dream is not really real. The Kshetramartyans make a further distinction. The dream experience has a certain reality of its own because it is the mind, the dependent nature, that is to say, the dream manifestations in themselves before one conceptualizes entities such as this is an enemy, this is a friend. The person in the dream imagined to be something separate from the things perceived in the dream is completely imaginary. The imposed duality to the object is actually completely imaginary, as are all the separate independent entities that seem to appear in it. These are the imaginary nature. The absolute truth is the emptiness of the mind of these entities. This is called the truly existent nature, because that emptiness is what truly is. So again, what we're talking about in terms of the three natures is that the general notion, this of course applies at all times. We talk about the relative truth, which is the obscured condition here, and the unobscured condition. So that is essentially we're defining the condition of confusion and non-confusion. But at the same time, what the Yogacaryans want to bring in is that all these perceptions that we have, they're not necessarily, you could say, evil in and of themselves. It's that the seventh consciousness that attributes solidity to them that is actually, you could say, veiling the quality of manifestation. And so the manifestations that we have, they're not in and of themselves a problem. It's the way that we perceive them according to the duality. So that's where they want to make a point about this dependent nature here, this mind. But of course, we can all agree, and all along the lines in Buddhism, we talk about the two truths. Reality known for what it is, that's the perfectly existent nature, and the conditioned, the relative truth in which we are deluded. So another example would be a film of a tiger or a snake. The concept of a real tiger or snake is the imaginary nature. Yeah, there we are. We're looking at a movie with a tiger and a snake. And in fact, it's just pixels, it's just perceptions, so on. They're innocent. But for us, it's like, yeah, you know. So then Khenpo says the mere appearance of the tiger or snake, i.e., the light playing on the screen in the form of a tiger or snake, is real and is the dependent nature. So that's fair enough. There's the pixels and the colors and all of that. The TV is not having a nervous breakdown, or the screen or whatever it is that it's being projected on. The projector is not worried. In fact, there's nothing you could say problematic here except us that see this, So that's where we're watching something scary, and that's the scary experience only lies in the dependent nature. So that's in the imaginary nature. So the object itself is the pixels and the so forth. That's the dependent nature. That's just what there is. So he says one could also think of the screen itself as the dependent nature, like the alaya vijnana from which all the other manifestations appear. The emptiness of the mere appearances, in the sense of their merely being light, empty of any real tigers or snakes, is the truly existent nature. So you have the dependent nature, which is then the silver screen and the lights that's being projected onto it and all of that. That's the dependent nature. There's us who think, oh, there's a tiger, there's a snake or whatever, and we're experiencing that. Then there's the Buddha who's sitting next to us watching exactly the same movie. The Buddha's chilling. He's like, oh yeah, nice snake movie, nice tiger movie. The Buddha's not freaked out because the Buddha is not held by the imaginary nature. The Buddha's just enjoying the display. So that's where the Buddha has realization of the emptiness. Yeah, the Buddha can see everything we see, but he's not freaked out, he's not reacting. He's not hoping for something to happen or not happen, and so forth. So that's the the emptiness of mere appearances is in the sense of their merely being light, empty of any real. Tigers or snakes is the truly existent nature. The screen's emptiness of real tigers is also the truly existent nature. So emptiness altogether, not being fooled, the Buddha not being fooled. This example is not as good as the dream example, though, because it gives the impression that the screen and the light playing on it are different substances. But in fact, these are just conditions, A better example for illustrating the relationship between the alaya vijnana and the other 6 consciousnesses is the ocean and the waves. So that's where you have the alaya vijnana, and on that then all these various perceptions, they manifest all the various consciousnesses. The imaginary nature is never anything but empty. That's the truth about the imaginary nature. The delusion that we have of snake, of tiger, all the delusion that we have of self, the world, everything that we call samsara, the dualistic experience and so on, all of that is always empty. It never moves from that point. So what is happening is the klesha mind produces the concept of a basic duality, and from that, all other names and concepts follow. So the nature itself is what it is, but we're misconstruing it on the basis of this klesha mind. So these concepts and names that our mind then produces, good, bad, and so forth, Khenpo says these are simply names and concepts, but none of the conceptualized entities they refer to actually exist. The mind is thinking tiger, dangerous, snake, horrible, dangerous, etc. But these conceptualized entities don't exist. They don't actually have any reference. So we have all these, what we're thinking of in terms of snake and so forth, they actually don't have a reality. They are simply imaginary. The dependent nature is real existence. That's why we would say, okay, here we're calling this all the mind manifest and so on. Yeah, that is true. Dempa Drupa. So that's where the Yogacharyans, they later take some flack. The truly existent nature is absolute existence. Döndam Drupa. So that's where the dependent nature is then seen as having a reality, and the reality about that, when realized, is what we call this is what we call the truly existing nature, the absolute existence. Okay. Read the book. If you don't have the book, please get it and read it, because that will help a lot. It'll help you become familiar with the material that we're speaking about here. And then no more path practice once all color. Yeah, but through the path, then gradually color emerges. That's why practitioners have rosy cheeks and little smiles, and generally are rather decent people. Then, according to Chittamatra, if I read the words of enlightenment, I should also be them, if no distinction between perceiver and perceived. Yeah, that's how we truly are. We are Buddhas. Unfortunately, there's a little bit temporary thing happening, that the fact is that we have this condition of confusion in where we're stuck in the imaginary nature. Yeah. So we presently have a condition of imaginary nature. We're imagining things. But when we're imagining things, we know that actually we're not getting it right. So if, for example, we have a fever and we are hallucinating, the truth is that what we're hallucinating is actually not there. And when we wake up, we realize I wasn't there. Or we might have friends next to us saying, hey, it's not really there. Yeah? What's the goal for practice shamatha? We reach the stage one can 100% focus on the breath as long as possible. Well, it's more to have the shamatha is really just that we're no longer distracted. So we're suffering from being distracted. I don't know if it happens to you when you meditate, but you might sit down and meditate and then your mind is wandering. So shamatha what enables the mind to be properly present, not carried away um, by confusion, thoughts, and so on. So of course, the more we have that, the better. Yeah. Manas, the klesha mind, is there an original purity to this consciousness when the base is released in and of itself? As for the Buddhas, is this? Yes, that's the thing. Well, the klesha mind, yeah. Well, it's a delusional condition. So you could say it's the imaginary. So it wears out. It's the moment of delusion. It intrinsically is pure, you know, but it's presently due to our confusion. We're stuck in this. We're fixating on it. It has a grip on us. My mind always feels totally fried after a few pages of progressive stages study. Begin to read the book and relax into it. You know, it's like anything. I remember when I received Denmark, when you get the driver's license, you have to do it with a teacher. And you have very little time because they're incredibly expensive, driving teachers, and it's very intense. And I thought, how do people ever learn to drive? And with other things, you know, if you had to study Latin in school, you know, or other things that are really difficult. You know, there's nothing, as they like, the Tibetans always like to say, there's nothing that doesn't become easy with practice. Yeah. Is it possible to say a little bit more about the shared nature of the ground consciousness as opposed to it being mine? Yeah, well, that's the thing. When we talk about our various perceptions, they are shared. So we see things. For example, we hear a common piece of music. That's a shared perception, but then again, we individually see it as different. So we presently have a shared experience of, let's say, this world. You know, the present world with its sort of the 5 continents and what have you. So there's a shared perception that we all have, shared karma, if you like. Yes, someone expresses joy in being back in class. That's very nice. Good. Does direct sense perception bypass manas filtration? That's an interesting question. Yes, it does actually. The initial moment of direct sense perception, we say, is without concepts. Then concepts come very quickly, right? Yeah. If everyone realizes Buddhahood, the advertising industry might collapse. Did the Chittamatras not care about the advertising industry? That's true. That's very uncompassionate of the Chittamatras. But then again, all these wonderful sort of advertising, the whole advertising populace, they will be abiding in permanent, unchanging bliss. So they have actually been thought about, even though their industry might collapse. Them as individuals, they will be looked after. So please get the word out there. Nothing to fear from the advertising industry, from the Chittamatrans and the Buddhists in general. The various industries, the individuals working in the various industries will be looked after. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll conclude on that note, and let me just see if I have a dedication sitting here somewhere. Yeah. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Okay, we'll take a few minutes break as we normally do, and then we'll do a little bit of first talking about meditation and then doing it. It'll be a little bit shorter today, I think, but we'll do some practice. So I'll just say a little bit about the practice of meditation. Someone was asking before about shamatha practice and whether the objective of shamatha practice is to be able to focus 100% all the time. Yeah, that is, you could say, the absolute quality of shamatha. That is this capacity to not be distracted. But that focus in itself, we shouldn't mistake that for being the result. So as much as having the capacity to not be distracted, just remaining focused all the time, and in some cases going into these conditions of what we call jhana and samadhi, in which we're just staying in a focused state without any distraction, but where there's no clarity. That's not particularly the objective. There has to be, for the from the point of view of what we're trying to do, which is extract ourselves from suffering and from samsara, then shamatha is essential. what is it Shantideva in the 9th chapter says, that, or the 8th chapter, where we need to have the vipassana that is founded on the basis of shamatha. So our insight necessarily needs to be founded on not just, the ideas of insight, because we can have various degrees of insight, understanding, and also some profound realization possibly. But if it just comes and goes, it's not really much. If the ordinary confused mind, it again and again impacts on us, then it's not very helpful. On the other hand, just having focus doesn't necessarily do anything to eliminate the cause of suffering, which is the cognitive obscuration that solidifies the self of person and the self of what we perceive. So we need to have an insight that understands that phenomena, they don't possess the reality they appear to have, and similarly also the experiencing subject doesn't really have the reality that we attribute to it. And relaxing with that insight, then practicing then non-distraction, then we unite the aspects of shamatha and vipassana. But there has to be someone who has come in and said, the tiger in your room is in fact just a paper tiger. And that's where we look and go, oh, no need to be afraid. And similarly, also the apparent solidity of things in ourselves that really have a grip on us. We need to first see that actually we need to arrive at a place of conviction, of clarity, of seeing that, oh yeah, it actually doesn't really have the reality that we assume that it has, that we imagine that it has. And in this way we can work with this flexible nature of our mind, which is ultimately empty and as such ultimately good. Where our mind is intrinsically pure. And that's why we're continually coming back to in the practice of meditation. We're falling back into this goodness. So if we can essentially not get caught up on the dramas of our confusion, then we fall into or settle into a condition of goodness. And that's what we're doing with the practice of meditation. But unless we have shamatha, then this goodness is lost again and again. And unless we have vipassana, then just being fully present, we might still think that the tiger is for real. So that's why we need both. We need calm and we need insight. We need calm abiding of shamatha and we need the wisdom of insight. Otherwise, the sage would just be, just a vegetable, very calm, like a turnip or a pumpkin, very calm, but not really able to do much good. The classical image, again, with all apologies to the animals represented in this image, is that of hibernating animals. The animals that hibernate, they're very calm, right? Their prana, their heart rate, and everything slows down. This also we see in the case of great yogis. Their prana and everything slows down, which can be very helpful if that yogi has vipassana. But other than that, then it could really just be, a rather vacuous, hibernating state in which basic cause hasn't been moved at all. The basic cause of suffering hasn't been eliminated, eradicated. So that's what we're doing with meditation, and we do it in various ways. All the aspects of Buddhist meditation, they work on eliminating confusion. So whether it's visualizing the Buddha, that you could say burns out or blows away the ordinary concerns. You think of your teacher, like Jamgön Kongtrul Lodrötaye says, thinking of my teacher, ordinary thoughts, they just fall away. So in the moments of devotion and bhakti, the presence of the Buddha, ordinary concepts just are so insignificant. Then again, we might not have that much devotion for the Buddha, or might not be that big a deal of thinking of our teacher, then good to just calm the mind. So that's why we then just come back to the breath, calming the mind, and just not being driven by the ordinary habitual concepts. So there's various ways, but all the various things that we do, particularly with what we call the skillful means in the Buddhist teaching, such as meditating on kindness and compassion for sentient beings, that's already something that diminishes the ordinary drama around self. And all the various 84,000 different teachings that we have, they all are remedies for just this single condition of confusion. So in one way or another, we can't go wrong. So whatever teaching that we're attracted to it works on, it works. So of course we do talk about some teachings that are more profound, they go deeper, but all of them they're doing the job. We're already onto it. You can clean with some heavy chemical, cleaning products, or you can just wash with water. Water might not be as efficient, but it's already doing something. It's already taking care of the dust. It's already good. So there's never ever time we waste when we're practicing, or even just our mind is turning towards the Dharma, as we say. There's a comment here, and it finishes off. It's very sweet, and then it finishes off. I'll get the book. We got to the previous. All right, that's good. Now, so with regards to specifically what we're doing here when we're meditating, the framework is the Buddha Sadhana by Jamgön Kongtrul Lodrötaye, which is recollecting the Buddha, which is always a good thing. The moment that we're recollecting the Buddha, we're touching on a core of sanity that we naturally possess. So there is this skillful means of, you could say, the external reference point of the Buddha, particularly then with the devotion that we feel for the Buddha and the atmosphere of invoking the Buddha. And that's where we simply just use imagination. You can think you're in Bodh Gaya or in India. There's the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, or however you choose, surrounded by students. Or you can visualize the Buddha in the space in front, however works. But the main thing is there's this sense of something great, and that's where the ordinary concepts fall away. And the language that we use is the language of complete and utter bhakti, the language of complete surrender, the complete appreciation of enlightenment. And enlightenment is big. So we're not just sort of mincing our words or sort of half-hearted about it. Yeah, you seem to be, great or anything. No, you are great. You're seriously great. You're seriously good news. And that, of course, has to be, we shouldn't walk into this as sort of naive fundamentalists and sort of, yes, the Buddha is great, and everybody who doesn't think so will, we won't tolerate them. That's not the implication, but it really is on the basis of what we're doing here, which is study, analyze, look at our own mind, reflect, process. Then we begin to really see, gosh, this is really extraordinary. And then we also see it in the representatives of the Buddha, the teachers that down from the time of the Buddha uphold what we call the Dharma of realization and the Dharma of transmission, of course. So that's where there's an incredible sense of greatness associated with the practice of the Buddha. And this comes from someone who had direct vision of the Buddha. And the Jamgön Rinpoche, and Rinpoche wrote this liturgy on the basis of this vision. And later he actually expounded on this practice in a vast work called the White Lotus Commentary. Anyway, we practice like that, invoking the Buddha. But then at one point, we dissolve the external reference of the Buddha. We simply just consider that the Buddha's light purifies all our confusion, all the duality we've been talking about. And then we just settle. And this is what we need to allow ourselves. I say, please don't miss out on just sitting. Sitting practice is so important because we're habitually always inclined to do things and think things and so on. What is so beautiful about all the practices that we do is that they lead up to a point where we're actually left to ourselves. We can actually trust ourselves. The Buddha didn't want to be this eternal babysitter, the eternal, object of adulation and idolatry. The Buddha wanted us to realize that we have this. And so all practices lead to a place where we just settle. And even though we as modern persons, we're so, conditioned by all the information and all the entertainment we have, it's difficult for us to just sit. But if we do this in conjunction with the sadhana practice, allowing the presence of the Buddha and then soaking in the presence of the Buddha, and then ultimately there is this message implicit in the Buddha purifying all our confusion, that we can actually leave the mind just in its own simplicity. And that's what we're doing when then at the point then we dissolve or rather we consider that the light from the Buddha purifies all our obscurations, and we just settle in that. That's what where we do some sitting. Now what we're going to do here today is we'll chant the liturgy, and then we'll just do one session of sitting for 20 minutes, and then we'll conclude. Yeah, we might do this for the time being that we're just doing this exclusively online. I hope it makes sense. But anyway, just sitting 20 minutes in itself is already good. It's already good. Of course, when we're meditating, it's important that it stays fresh. So we're going to be distracted. When we discover that we're distracted, then the moment that we know we're distracted, well, we're no longer distracted. We don't have to regurgitate a particular narrative about I can't meditate or I was not meditating. What was I thinking about? Was it interesting what I was thinking about? And analyzing. That's again distraction. Just coming back, being present. And that's why it's very helpful to have the simplicity of the reference point of the breath. And so when we're meditating, we sit straight, good posture, good head and shoulders, and then we have, when we're sitting, we have this simplicity that really is aided and helped greatly by when we're distracted, we just come back to the breath. And as we're sitting, we can also just have the breath as a reference point. If we don't have the breath as a reference point, there's a danger that we might just be sitting thinking about, what's the meaning of life? What am I doing, etc. Just coming back to the simplicity of the single object of the breath, it is enormously beneficial, very skillful. Of course, if you can settle into just the simplicity of, the nature of mind, very good. Please do this by all means. But if not, then very helpful to just come back to the breath. Now we do this. Actually, let me just bring it up here. So many things going on here, right? Now we do this where we first take refuge in the Buddha. And taking refuge means that we completely rely on the Buddha as being the one who actually found out, who got the picture. We got it right. We got it straight. And that's where we take refuge in the Buddha as the one who knows the way out of confusion, as the supreme guide, as the supreme refuge. Is teaching those who follow. And then also we do this with an awareness to the larger community of sentient beings. And we're not leaving anybody behind. Others matter to us. And that's also where we then further articulate this through the chanting of the 4 immeasurables, wishing others to be happy, free of suffering, that they may have joy. And we wish that equally for all beings. And then we visualize the Buddha as the manifestation of the nature of reality, the one who realized reality, realized the truly existent nature, no longer held by the imaginary nature. And as such, arising out of this, the nature of reality, then we consider Buddha present as we're visualizing it here. And then we have what's called the 7 branches, which is essentially bowing to the Buddha, making offerings, parting from negative patterns, rejoicing in those who practice the path, requesting that the Buddha teach, rejoicing in the example of the Buddha, and requesting the Buddha to always remain in this world, and then dedicating what's good in that. We dedicate again. We do this again, that we're dedicating this to others. And then we have a very short devotional chant to the Buddha, which is the supreme teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, and so forth, where we're essentially very briefly, Lama Tempa Chomden de Deshin Shekra Chompa Yanda, Watobasan de Pel, Gyawashake Tubala Chat, Judo Chapter Chi. Oh, it's very short. And this we can do really at any time. If we have little time, you can just sit down, visualize the Buddha, and just chant these lines, Supreme Teacher. And then also the Dharani, the Teyata Om Muni Muni, and the mantra Om Muni Muni, just very essentially invoking the Buddha's presence. And then, hold on. Don't see here. You can see there's a fair bit of engineering that goes on in with these webinars. So then at the end, we have, from the Buddha's body, there emanates great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light. Now, the nature of the Buddha is intangible, but it has this intangible quality of the Buddha, the emptiness, you could say, is illuminated by wisdom. It's something that is unconfused. And this is innate to us as well. So there's this continual presence of non-confusion. If we're present, then it's always there, this luminous quality. And so we think of the Buddha really in terms of essentially this quality of wisdom, his wisdom body. It's not born, it's not something that decays and gets old. It's the unconditional quality of awakening that's basic to reality. And that's what we as sentient beings fail to connect with, and what we are then connecting with through the path. And so recognizing this quality as innate to the Buddha, we consider that all this light then radiates, dispels all our confusion and so forth, and all the qualities, simply just uncovering the pure dependent nature, the truly existent nature, having eliminated the imaginary nature, then we just settle in that unobscured state. That's where we won't fall into confusion again. Doesn't mean that we're going to abandon sentient beings, but for the time being, the main thing is we're not going to be confused again. So it's like, no longer confused. Yeah. And then at the end, we dedicate this. We make some aspirations. May all this, the nature of enlightenment appears in these various ways. May all beings become enlightened. And then we also make the aspiration prayer, Maitreya. So that's very simply what we're doing here. Okay, 1 minute break, just so you can stretch and so forth. Then we'll begin. So in the Samadhi Sutra, it says, those who while walking, sitting, standing, or sleeping recollect the moon like Buddha will always be in the Buddha's presence and will attain the vast nirvana. And his pure body is the color of gold. Beautiful is the protector of the world. Whoever visualizes him like this practices the meditation of the Bodhisattvas. In keeping with this, we should practice remembering our incomparable teacher, the Lord of Sages, in the following way. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky amidst vast clouds of offerings, on a jewel lion throne and lotus sun and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, Lion of the Chakras. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks. Clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders, and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the two extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embrace this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues, the body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed throughout beginningless time, each and every one, I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings, accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teaching ceaselessly, and in every direction I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, am accumulating now, and will accumulate in the future, for the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space, may you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased. And may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness, caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the three jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Deyadao Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. 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 O 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 Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. O Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. O Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. O Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Mahamunaya Soha. From the Buddhist body there emanates a great radiance, multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to arise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. The miraculous display of the unsurpassable wisdom appears as the intentions, deeds, prayers, knowledge, love, and ability of all the Sugatas and their children. May all beings become exactly like them. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas endowed with the divine eye of the sages, and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts birth in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging nor death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind, in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seed of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the worlds in the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their hordes, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those, supreme among humans, to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away and those yet to come, may I train following in their way and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, and those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize the Dhamma Dhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings nor life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dhamma, where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping on to a self in mind is not present within any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity, free of avarice. Since things do not exist as entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with a flawless ethics that is guided by rules, and an ethics that is completely pure. With an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like a vajra, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the 3 gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the 3 times, and the 3 types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya, who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world. May the light of the teaching shine like the sun. May the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to belong. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed never to part from the teachings. Akashasya stiti avat yavacha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Akashasya stiti avat yavacha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. So thank you very much. Just to announce a little bit what's happening in terms of programs. We're going to be recommencing pretty much everything, but probably due to the present situation here in Australia, most of what we're going to be doing for the next month or so, if not 2, if not 3, let's see, will be probably done online. So there are some programs that we have announced that would happen in various places, but as it looks right now, it's not very likely that we're going to be able to do it. So we're looking at things being online once again for a while. Anyway, stay tuned, and thus the program begins. The Wednesday morning program, the study of the way of the Bodhisattva guide, will start again, and the treasury of precious qualities, that's actually been running throughout the holidays. So these 3 weekly programs, they're continuing, and there will then also be programs coming up. In addition to that, there's the nightly readings. I think tonight or tomorrow, but possibly tonight, will be the last night of reading the Masters of Meditation and Miracles. There will, however, be, so I'll read something for the next few days, or someone else will be reading, we'll see. And then on Friday, again, running from 8 o'clock for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, sometimes even an hour, reading then, which will be of Blazing Splendor, which are the memoirs of Tugurjen Rinpoche. Tugurjen Rinpoche was a very great master of the Nyingma Kaju tradition. He was a master of masters and also had many students from all over the world. There's so much to be said about Tugurjen, but he lived. He was the grandson of the great master Chögyal Dzogchen Lingpa, and great grandson. Anyway, his whole family and his whole world was essentially permeated by what we refer to as Khen Kong Choksum, the Khensas, the legacy of the Khensas, Chögyal Dzogchen Lingpa and Jamgön Kongtrul, and other great masters. And so he had a wonderful gift for telling stories, and he had the fortune of some very, very close students of his, Westerners, particularly one student who was a very great translator, Eric Pema Kunzang, who collected a lot of Tugurjen Rinpoche's memoirs and published them then as he worked together with his wife, Masia Binder, and they published this work called Blazing Splendor. There's also a blog. I sent an email out, so most of you are familiar with this, but the email didn't contain so much information really about what I'm saying right now. But anyway, just to let you know that that's happening. And other than that, yeah, in a few weeks' time, I'll have a conversation with Elizabeth Mattis Namjal, and throughout the next few months, conversations with various people. it'll all be announced. But anyway, good to be back here, and I hope every one of you are well. Hope practice is going well in the sense that you're persevering, having stable, regular practice, no obstacles. And thank you very much for being here. Yeah, so somebody's asking about the times here. Yeah, if you look in the email, the program begins at 5 p.m. It's Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time, AEDT. So right now we have, what, 7:15. So it's, yeah, so it runs essentially from, I think these days while we're doing it online, it'll run from 5 to 7, and like you see now, a little bit more than that. So yeah. So all right, thank you all very much. Nice to see you here. All the very best. See you again.